the fact of the matter is, none of these scare stories, and there's 11 chapters in my book on 11 different scare stories, some of them a little bit funny, others very serious, like the climate scare, for example, which promises to destroy human civilization by lack of energy, saying we must now go to net zero, apparently. 10% isn't good enough. Got to go down to the ground here and get rid of 80 to 85% of the energy that drives civilization every day. And mechanization is a wonderful thing. It's reduced the horrible toil of subsistence agriculture and hammering rocks with giant, to build things by hand. Everything was done by hand before mechanization. And almost everybody had to work really hard and die young as a result. And today we've got all this machinery, robots making cars and all this sort of thing. But it used to be that more people lived in the country than lived in the city. So a majority of people knew what was going on. Now, a really large majority of people live in a completely artificial environment called urban, or cities. And the people who live, especially in the middle of those cities, have no idea what's going on out in the world. So they've been brainwashed, basically, into thinking the people who are out in the country that are plowing and drilling and blasting and cutting and whatever they're doing to get the food, energy, and materials from the earth, they think they are the enemies of the earth, the enemies of nature, because they're wrecking it like that. Well, there's only one reason those people are doing that, is to get what the city people need to survive every day. And that's why the city people are susceptible to these scare stories, because they are not living in the real world. They are living in a bubble. They're living almost in a fantasy world with their video games and their supermarkets where they have no idea that the trucks are bringing that food in at night, and every morning the shelves are stocked for them to take it up to the 50th floor of the condo they're living in. Otherwise they'd starve to death, and they just don't know that. So it's a serious book in that sense, but I use a fair bit of humor. I wrote it in language that the average person can understand. It's not written in scientific language. It's written for anybody in high school and on up. And what I'm hoping is that parents will find it and read it for themselves and then give it to their kids that are of grade 9 and up age. Because anybody with a proficiency in English can read it and understand it. And believe me, I've been studying this stuff for over 50 years. And I know all the ins and outs. And I'm able to explain it in a way that people will believe. Because they are being sold a bill of goods by the people raising all this money and selling all their newspapers with these stories of catastrophes and doom, pretending that computer models can predict the future and all the rest of it. It is actually, in some ways, a giant conspiracy on the part of the people in those elites who are spreading these scare stories, because fear makes it easier to control people. We've seen that in the COVID pandemic, that governments are willing to use fear and control in combination with each other in order to control people. And Lord knows the rich people are getting richer and the poor people are getting poorer in this pandemic. And the same thing would happen if we move towards net zero fossil fuels, as they call it. I don't know why anybody would want zero much of anything unless it was really evil. So they're basically judging fossil fuels as not only not so good, but kind of like as evil, as if they should be expunged from civilization.